Hi, this is U.S. Senator Marco Rubio. As always, it's my privilege and my honor to serve you here in Washington, D.C. This week's been a tragic one for the United States of America, with the loss of 4 of our personnel overseas, including Ambassador Stevens of Libya. We received a lot of emails and letters about it, and so I wanted to dedicate this portion of, or this week's installment of Constituent Mailbox to focus specifically on what's happening overseas, both in Cairo and Egypt, in Yemen, and of course in Libya. We got an email from Janice in Longwood, who wrote about Egypt and Libya, and writes that as an avid supporter of you and your policies, I've been angered enough by last night's news regarding the attacks on our U.S. Embassy in both Egypt and Libya. And then of course Martin in St. Petersburg writes, why is there no American response to these desecrations? Why are my tax dollars wasted on a country like Egypt? So I thought I'd take a few moments today to talk about what is a complex and growing issue. One that even perhaps by the time you see this video may have changed already. Let's begin with the fact that all of this really takes its root back in about a year ago, when the Arab Spring, it got rid of all these dictators in the region. In particular, got rid of a dictator in Egypt and another one in Libya, not to mention some other countries. And you're seeing it still continue in places like Syria. The result is that a totalitarian ruler was eliminated, and that's a positive thing for the world and the people of those countries. But it's created different and difficult circumstances just the same. And that's what we're dealing with now. The first thing I want to make clear is that there is a dramatic difference between Egypt and Libya on what's happening. In Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood won an election in that country. Unfortunately, they have not been as nearly committed to counterterrorism as their predecessors were. And as a result, or somehow related to it, you've seen an increase in Islamic terrorist violence in the region, particularly in Egypt. And unfortunately, you saw some of it manifest itself in those that attacked our embassy in Cairo, brought down and burned the American flag, and put another flag up instead. It's unacceptable. Every country in the world has an obligation to protect the diplomatic corps that's located within those countries, and Egypt is no exception. Egypt receives a tremendous amount of aid from the United States of America. And even if they didn't, like every country in the world, we have a right to demand that those countries do whatever it takes to ensure the security and well-being of our diplomatic personnel overseas. When it comes to what happened in Cairo, they failed to do that. What really troubled me is that for 24 hours after that attack and the murder of Ambassador Stevens in Libya, we heard virtually nothing from the President Morsi of Egypt. Instead, he focused on condemning a YouTube video that anyone can make. At the end of the day, the response to a YouTube video that someone's offended by is not to burn down an embassy or murder an ambassador. And yet that's what's happened overseas. And the response of President Morsi was not to express outrage about that, but instead to ask his embassy here in the United States of America to sue the makers of the YouTube video. It's very troubling, quite frankly unacceptable, that the leader of a country that receives as much aid as Egypt receives from us would take so long to express any sort of outrage or condemnation on what's occurred, and focused the almost entire majority of his attention on a YouTube video instead of condemning violence that ultimately led to the death of 4 Americans, 4 American diplomats overseas. So I'm very disappointed about what's happened with Egypt. I think we need to continue to demand not only that they secure our embassy in Cairo, but that they find out who it was that was responsible for organizing this attack on our embassy, and do everything they can to bring those folks to justice. Libya is a different story. In Libya, almost 2/3 of the people voted against the Islamists in the recent elections. That means they voted against Islamist leaders. They voted for a secular, non-Islamist government and a new future for their country. Unfortunately, because of a protracted civil war that led to the fall of Gaddafi, the government in Libya doesn't have a lot of money or resources in their security apparatus. In essence, there are entire areas of the country, huge amounts of land in the nation of Libya, that are outside the control of the government, that the government doesn't control. What happens is that Islamist terrorists see that as an opportunity. They like to operate in countries where the government can't do anything to them or about them. It's in those places where they can set up terrorist training camps and coordinate operations. And sadly, because the civil war in Libya took so long to finish, that's what we have in Libya today. A government that would like to get rid of these terrorists, a government that does not sympathize with Islamists, but a government that simply doesn't have the security apparatus in place to do anything about it right now. As a result, sadly, Libya has become a country where Islamist terrorists, not just from Libya, but from all over the region, have begun to congregate and organize. And that, of course, was one of the ingredients that was in place for this attack on the consulate in Benghazi. Now, the Libyans, unlike the Egyptians, immediately responded. They condemned it right away. In fact, there's growing evidence that many Libyans on the street tried to assist the consulate personnel even after the attacks took place. But they just don't have the resources to deal with it. And so as a result, this horrible tragedy happened. But it's important for folks to understand that at least at the outset, we know very clearly that there is a dramatic difference between the way the Libyan government reacted to this and the way the Egyptian government has reacted to this. And I think that now our commitment needs to be about three things. Number one, we need to make sure that this never happens again. We need to fully assess the security at all of our diplomatic outposts all over the world to ensure that they have the appropriate security in place to deal with anything like this now or in the future. Number two, we need to find out what happened. Why was there not adequate security? Why wasn't the consulate able to protect itself from this kind of attack and protect our personnel in there? Was it a failing on behalf of the Libyans? Was it a failing on behalf of our security personnel? We need to find that out. Were there warnings that were ignored? We need to do the hard work of investigating how this happened so it will never happen again. And number three, we need to find the people who did this and bring them to justice. And at that end, I am pleased at the cooperation that we're getting from the Libyans in allowing us and in assisting us in finding these people and bringing them to justice. Because folks need to understand that there are consequences for murdering Americans overseas. There are consequences for attacking the United States of America. And those consequences will be met and will be paid. And that's what's happening right now. And as I said, I'm encouraged by the cooperation we're getting from our Libyans, friends and allies. And I think we should be concerned about the lack of a cooperation, to date anyway, that we've gotten from Egyptian authorities. We hope that will change. This is a tremendous tragedy. At the end of the day, I think our hearts should be first and foremost with the families of those who have lost loved ones in the service of our country. In particular, Ambassador Stevens is someone who I met when I visited Libya a year ago, after Gaddafi had fallen, but before he had been captured. He assisted us not just in the meeting, but I was taken by how much love he had for the country and how much hope he had for its future. By the same token, he came to visit us here in Washington, D.C. when he was nominated to be the next ambassador to a free Libya. And I was encouraged by his service. I was happy to vote for his confirmation. He was the right man for the job. And the people of Libya, and particularly the people of Benghazi, loved Ambassador Stevens. And you just saw a few days ago how many of them came out into the streets holding up signs, recognizing who he was and what he meant to the people of that country. It is a tragic loss, not just of the ambassador, but of 3 other Americans who were serving our country and the cause of freedom overseas, and for that paid the ultimate price. Our prayers are with them and with their families. We will never forget their service to our country, and we will not allow their deaths to be in vain. We continue to be committed to the cause of liberty and freedom, and we will bring the people who did this to justice so that the world will know that if you take on the United States of America, there will be a price to pay. Well, I wish we could end on a lighter note, but unfortunately this tragedy has overshadowed the week. I look forward to coming back to you again next week with other issues that are on your mind. But until then, may God bless all of you. May God bless the United States of America. And may God bless the families of our 4 brave Americans who lost their lives in Libya this week. Thank you.